If I asked you who you thought the first naval commandos were, you'd probably think of modern special forces. The Navy SEALs would probably come to mind. Those of you more familiar with naval history might think of the UDT, the underwater demolition teams of World War II. But they were far from the first. The origin of the modern naval commando goes back far further than that. First, let's look at the golden age of sail and the tactic of cutting out. Cutting out is as old as sailing itself, but rose to prominence during the Napoleonic Wars. Sailors would load up into small boats in the dead of night, row up to an anchored ship, slip aboard, and overwhelm the crew before cutting the mooring lines, hence cutting out. They would then sail off into the distance, Jack Sparrow style. This most famously happened with the cutting out of the HMS Hermione, a British ship that had mutinied and joined the Spanish. The British sent the HMS Surprise to negotiate its return. Instead of negotiate, however, 100 British sailors slipped out under cover of darkness and rowed towards the Hermione. They were spotted after becoming entangled in a barrier and came under fire. However, in the confusion, the Hermione fired on her own gunboats. The British slipped aboard, overpowered the confused crew, then cut the mooring lines and sailed away. Despite being outnumbered almost 4-1 and being outgunned by several hundred cannons, no British were killed, but 120 Spanish were killed and the rest captured. This was a particularly famous action, but it wasn't the first example of naval special actions. That honor goes to the Greeks. Divers were first used to run messages into and out of blockaded cities. They'd use rocks to control their buoyancy and darken their faces with dye before silently swimming past blockades. Some gained great fame as divers, such as Hidna of the city-state Syene, who with her father swam through an anchored Persian fleet, cutting their mooring lines. Thus, when a storm came through later that night, the ships jostled together, damaging them and delaying the Persian invasion. This wasn't an unusual event either. Divers were used often in the Polynesian Wars, even hand-drilling holes into the hulls of ships. Imagine the surprise of the captain when some Greek jackass started poking holes in his ship with an oversized screwdriver. And this wasn't even the most impressive feat of the divers. Byzantine freedivers worked in teams to attach ropes to blockading Roman warships. Teams of men on shore then drug the ships close enough for shore batteries to deal with them, thus stealing the enemy ships. Much like modern Navy divers, the Greeks also used swimmers for military construction. At the famous siege of Tyre, Alexander the Great used divers to clear underwater obstacles, or at the siege of Malta, the Maltese divers placed stakes below the waterline to prevent amphibious landings. The Turkish divers then tied ropes and pulled them out using their ships. Of course, fighting broke out between the two groups of combat swimmers. Combat swimming wasn't unique to the Mediterranean either. I'm going to butcher this, so forgive me. Owaski Hiyashi Soke, the ancient samurai martial art of combat swimming, taught practitioners underwater combat and swimming techniques. As you can see, the commando predates our modern idea of frogmen and has a long and storied history. Let me know if you like the naval history I'm featuring on my channel, as I do enjoy researching and making these, and as long as you guys like them, I'll continue to do so.